week it's been. 69 countries coming together and over 10,000 registered attendees. So to the audience, you guys have been fabulous, absolutely fabulous. And we've gotten a ton of comments saying that our next session is. So if you do have any thoughts, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, we'd love to see them. I'm tracking them live over here. Be sure to follow us on India Inc. Corp and use the hashtag #BeTheRevival. Share your thoughts with us. That's India Inc. Corp, India INCORP. That being said, as Manoj Ladwa said in his video, India Inc. believes in building winning partnerships, and we've had some great sponsors. So shout out to all the sponsors here at Global Week 2020. You guys have been fabulous. If you've missed any of the sessions here at India Global Week, you can log on to the website www.indiaglobalweek.com and check the sessions out yourself. That being said, let's go directly into our next session titled Partners in Revival, India's Role in Shaping a Better New World, a conversation with Minister of External Affairs for the Government of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Dr. Jaishankar is credited for his contributions to Indian diplomacy and has played a leading role in restructuring India's global conversations. He's a retired officer of the IFS and the former Foreign Secretary of India. I now give the floor to our moderator and my other host for India Global Week, Ms. Edie. The floor is all yours.
Welcome to the India Global Week session on Partners in Revival, India's role in shaping a better new world. My name is Edie Lush. I am really pleased now to be joined by Dr. Jaishankar, India's foreign minister. He's made the transition from a career diplomat to politics. Let me mention just a few highlights from his career. Moscow in the early 80s, the United States as a political attaché during President Reagan's second term, Hungary and the Czech Republic after the fall of the Berlin Wall, Tokyo in the late 90s. He was India's ambassador to China in 2009 and ambassador to the United States during the Obama administration. So, Dr. Jaishankar, before we look into your portfolio, external affairs, let's spend a moment on the pandemic. I'm currently in the UK, where we're in the process of opening back up, but in India, cases are still rising. But if I look at the comparative data, either on a case per million or deaths per million basis, India is on a much better trajectory. Can you give me a view on how India has handled the pandemic?
Actually, I must tell you, other than as a minister and as a citizen, I happen to be in a group of ministers which was tasked with coming up with the response to the policy response to the coronavirus. So look, when the pandemic started assuming global proportions, I think the choice which every country had was, how do you respond, and respond in a sense playing to your own strengths. Now, some countries had better testing capabilities, like the South Koreans. Some, perhaps, like Germany, had a very strong ICU system. In our case, sort of recognizing our capabilities and our limitations, I think we opted really to rely very substantially on social distancing. So we went for a very early lockdown. We went for a very early travel restriction. And the result of that, 3 months down the road, yes, the actual caseload today is large. It's not large, as you say, proportional to the population. But what's interesting is, while we may be number 3 in terms of the caseload, if you look even at the absolute number of fatalities, we are number 8. We have a recovery rate of 61%. And the time gained has, in a sense, not just slowed the spread, it has allowed really preparations in a way. We were making no personal protection equipment when the coronavirus hit us. Today we produce, we're reasonably self-sufficient there. We've ramped up our pharmaceutical response to that. The hospital systems have responded to that. So we still have our challenges ahead. We are very conscious of it. I think the next few weeks and months are going to be tough. But in the given situation, we feel we made the right choices and are as realistically well placed as anybody could be under the circumstances.
So if I could give you a crystal ball and you could look forward into the future when there's either a vaccine or some level of herd immunity, how do you think India is positioned in a post-coronavirus world?
Well, I think we could, when it comes to the vaccine itself, as you know, that is an area again where India has strengths. We are the world's largest producer of vaccines, and I think once people discover a vaccine or multiple vaccines for this, clearly we will have a role in making that accessible and affordable and available to the rest of the world. In fact, even before the vaccine, I should add, in this period, actually, when there was a surge in demand for corona-related drugs, we've actually responded to that to the world. We've supplied medicines to more than 120 countries, including a lot of small countries who would not have normally had access to it because the demands on those medicines were very high. So we set some apart for them. And we made that extra effort, countries in the CARICOM or countries in the Pacific Islands, for example. So a lot of the our African partners, we went the extra mile to make sure that they had medicine. So I think in the post-corona world, I don't need a crystal ball. I can actually see that pretty clearly that we are going to be able, we'll have to step up much more in health policy and medically responding to it. But let me sort of give you where I need the crystal ball probably is more in the politics of a post-corona world. And my sense there is a lot of the trends that we saw before the coronavirus, they could well accelerate. I mean, what we have seen even in response in the last 6 months, for example, we've seen a lot of countries behaving more nationalistically, people frankly looking out for themselves. I mean, I understand it up to a point, but I do see a world where many, shall I say, arguments will sharpen. I think there will be issues of trust which have been raised. There will be questions on resilient supply chains. So it's going to be a more difficult world.
So let's look at your relationship with the United Kingdom. Last year, you said at this event that the UK is a major partner for India. Mm-hmm. How would you describe those emerging contours of the relationship? And what are your priorities as we transition to a post-Brexit era?
Right. Well, look, I think to a certain extent, how any country relates to the UK would depend on how UK itself evolves. And in a post-Brexit moment, which has got sort of extended because of the coronavirus becoming a central issue, that's not yet clear. So, but having said that, I would say, I'm now giving you a kind of an Indian perspective. There are many UKs, okay? There is a historical UK, which is a sort of a global UK, which still has influence and interests all over the world. There is the City of London, UK. There is a European UK, despite Brexit. I mean, you're still very, very closely tied to Europe. There is a very unique transatlantic UK because there's still a relationship with the Americans, which nobody else has that degree of closeness. There is a diaspora UK, a much more multicultural, pluralistic UK, which has evolved in the last 50, 60 years. And I would say probably in many ways, there's a much more innovative UK today. I mean, people often, when you sometimes think of the City of London, you also forget this is also a country with enormous scientific, technological capabilities. There are a lot of things going on there in your universities, research institutions. So for me, as an Indian sort of foreign minister, when I look at it, I need to cover that entire spectrum of those multiple UKs. Their internal balance will kind of emerge as your post-Brexit positions become clearer. But obviously, all these will be aspects in my calculation.
So you mentioned there a couple of different UKs and a new India. And I wonder if you could spend a moment speaking about multilateralism and the UK-India relationship within multilateral institutions. Many have said that as a result of or as part of this coronavirus moment, we're seeing multilateralism in crisis. And I wonder if you could say more about the UK's level of cooperation and understanding with India in some of these multilateral institutions.
Well, I would not differ with what you said, which is that multilateralism, I'm not sure is under crisis, certainly under stress. But along with that, along with weakening multilateralism, you also have greater multipolarity. You have many more players, the not just at the sort of the top level of world politics, but I would say, in a sense, middle powers. Much more region. If you look at what's happening in many regions, it's much more autonomous of what's happening in the world. So there is a lot of there are a lot of moving parts, many more moving parts, and a less centralized system to sort of guide them along. Now, I think it's important for countries like India and UK, who at the end of the day have a certain shared, I would say, worldview, shared belief. There is a way we look at the world. There are, we have our sense of what is right and what is wrong. So it's important for countries who share sort of basic principles in their approach to international relations to work closely together. And I think this is a year where we've just been elected to the UN Security Council. We will be there for the next 2 years. 2 years from now, we'll also be the G20 chair. So we will be, very visible in the multilateral arena, and certainly, I would see the UK as one of our natural partners out there.
So let's step away from the UK-India relationship. Can you tell me about the border crisis with China, and where does it stand now?
What's just happened is that we've agreed on the need to disengage because the troops on both sides are deployed very close to each other. So there is a disengagement and a de-escalation sort of process which has been agreed upon. It has just commenced. It's very much work in progress. So I think at this point, I really wouldn't like to say more than that.
Okay, let's stay within your part of the world and look at your relationship with Australia. The India-Australia equation has really strengthened enormously in recent years. We've even seen a virtual summit between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Morrison. 2 years ago, Australia said that it wanted India as one of its top 3 export markets. So there's a trade aspect to it. But there's also an aspect around increasing regional security and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. So I wonder if you could say more about the relationship.
Sure. Well, I was privileged to be part of that virtual summit between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Morrison. And, of course, at a personal level, the two prime ministers have got along really very, visibly well. They have a strong chemistry. I was there when they met. This was last year in Osaka and then in Bangkok. So, in some ways, there is I would say they're both people who are very direct. I would say what you see is what you get. So they relate very well to each other. But this is really more than personality. I think there are strong structural and policy reasons why India and Australia are doing very much more with each other. I referred in one of the earlier points to the role that middle powers would play. And if you look today, Australia is a country with considerable weight, considerable influence, with a lot of interest in the region. And again, when you look at this world today where the regional architecture is much more loose and sort of open-ended than it used to be before, it's important for countries who may be located in somewhat different parts of the world, but who have overlaps and who have convergences to look for common points and see where they can work together. And in the case of Australia, I mean, part of it is the English, part of it is the cricket. We have a very, very large, almost 100,000 students in Australia, and we have a growing economic relationship. But beyond all of that, I think there is today a sense in India and a sense in Australia that, look, it's very important if the larger region is to be more secure, more stable, more predictable, to work on the lines with which we would be comfortable, then countries like India and Australia need to come together, and that's really what you are seeing happening. So what happened at this virtual summit? I mean, it actually produced some very important agreements on maritime security, agreements on the defense forces having an understanding on providing mutual logistic support, on cybersecurity, on mining, on agriculture, on science and technology. So it was a very substantive event. But again, as I said, it's not the event, it's a trend. I would say that you should be looking for a much stronger relationship to unfold in the coming days.
It's really pleasing, actually, to me personally, that you're putting forward a case for globalization in a way, for relations, rather than quite a lot of what we've heard recently is a real sort of, as you mentioned before, real nationalization, a real kind of closing in. Thinking a little bit about Singapore, you were India's High Commissioner to Singapore from 2007 to 2009, and Singapore has long been a strategic and economic partner for India. Where do you see room for growth?
Mostly when people ask me a question about Singapore, they get at least a half an hour reply. And it's largely positive and in praise of Singapore, because I would say of the many postings I've done, if there's one place I actually regard as a sort of pulse of the world, where you're there, but you kind of pick up what's happening all over the world. I mean, there's nothing like Singapore for that. But in terms of where we are with Singapore, look, Singapore's had an extraordinarily important, interesting role in the changes which have taken place in India. And it goes back to the early 90s when we were coming out of a closed economy model. And when we looked at the world and sort of, in a sense, look for different reference points which would allow us to change our policies, Singapore happened to be one of the important ones. And it's interesting. If I just give you one number, there are today 9,000 Indian companies in Singapore. So it will tell you how important it is in terms of our global economic activities. It is also the trade with Singapore is about $18 billion, which it will be among our top trade partners. It's the channel through which a lot of the investments go in and out of India. We have very close defense and security relations with Singapore. There are probably more flights to Singapore from India than to any other foreign destination. So there's just physically the number of Indians who travel to Singapore is very high. So why I stress that is, for us, it's a very unique relationship. And it's a relationship which is very central to our larger relationship with the world. So it's not just a country-to-country relationship. For me, as I said, it's a pulse of the world. So, and since I expect, India to actually increase its engagement with the world, I can imagine naturally that will happen so with Singapore.
So in addition to Singapore, you've also have extensive experience with the United States, both under Democratic and Republican administrations. I was really interested to see after President Modi tweeted to wish the United States a happy 4th of July recently. Trump said in a tweet, "Thank you, my friend. America loves India." India is really a rare country that has handled transitions quite well in the United States, and it has genuine bipartisan goodwill in DC. So what's your secret? How do you do it?
Well, I've thought about it, and let me, in a sense, put your own question back at you. Think back at the last 4 American presidents: Donald Trump, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. I'm sure you'd agree with me, you can't find 4 people in the world less similar to each other. Right? And yet the one thing on which actually all 4 of them have agreed on is the importance of India and the need to strengthen their relationship with us. Maybe some of it is our charm, but I think a lot of it is also their thinking. And what we have actually in the US today is we have a very strong, political relationship, strategic relationship, very strong security defense cooperation, an increasing economic relationship, a very unique technology relationship. I mean, if you look at really how the 2 countries are interlinked in terms of, I'm not just talking about Indian Americans, I'm really talking about how work goes up and down and ideas go up and down, and the role that we have played actually in the growth of American technology as well. And in a way, and of course, people to people. I mean, if you look at the number of Indian Americans, they have grown from 30,000 at the time of our independence. Today, probably close to about 4 million. And very large number of them are still Indians, also Indians who are there on non-immigrant visas of various kinds. So it's been a very it's a relationship, I would say, which took about 6 decades to discover itself. But having done so, it's making up for lost time. And I think, when we speak about all the other commonalities, which are, a lot of what I said, I'm either describing what's happening or it's a kind of a connect. I would say somewhere values do matter. Indians and Americans today have a better understanding of each other's society, and therefore a much closer appreciation. I mean, they sort of feel for each other in a way in which many countries perhaps don't do so closely. And it's not just with the administration of the day, though obviously that is critical. I think we have very strong, very diverse relationship across the American polity, especially in the American Congress. There would be the congressional leadership of both parties. Again, our people over multiple, decades, really, we have had good relations, but certainly the last 2 decades, that's become stronger. So I see this as one of, certainly as one of our key relationship, but I expect it's a relationship which will become more important even in the American calculus of the world.
So final question for you. On a personal level, not everyone can make the leap from being a career diplomat to corporate executive to politics. So how are you finding the challenge?
Well, I'm surviving. And I think, I don't know if you remember the Yes Minister series.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to be both the Sir Humphrey and the Jim Hacker. And
what
just
do you mean
for the
by
record,
that?
Earlier in my life, I was the burnout as well. But perhaps one reason for that ability to make the transition is, if you're not just a civil servant, regular civil servant, but a diplomat. I think by being a diplomat, you tend to be more nimble. You tend to adapt to your surroundings, and you are very curious. You're willing to learn all the time. That's what diplomacy is about. And certainly, I find the political world to be very fascinating. And it's been a year now. It's almost just a year and 2 months since I became an MP. And I can tell you I'm still learning, but it's enormously fascinating and extremely rewarding.
Dr. Jaishankar, thank you so much for joining us here during India Global Week. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you. Pleasure.
That was External Affairs Minister, Government of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, in conversation with our fellow host here at India Global Week, Miss Edie Lush from London. Thank you guys for that. That was a great conversation. Namaste, hello, and welcome to India Global Week. Be the Revival, India and a Better New World. I'm your host, Priyanka Deo, reporting live from New Delhi, and what a fabulous week it's been. We've had amazing sessions, countless panels, fantastic guests, and the audience has been great. We've got 69 countries coming together and over 10 registered attendees. So thank you guys all for being here. And as Manoj Ladwa said, India Inc. feeds on global partnerships, and we want to thank and give a big shout out for sponsors. You guys have been great. That being said, to our audience, if you guys are looking, if you guys have any questions, thoughts, please do share your thoughts at India Inc. or that's India INC. I'm sorry, that's India INCORP, and use the hashtag #BeTheRevival. With that being said, we're just going to take a short break here at India Global Week. Stay tuned. Just a few minutes. Our next session. I'm your host Priyanka Deo, reporting from New Delhi. Just sit tight and enjoy the rest of India Global Week.